Hey preteens, Mr. Chris. I cannot believe that we're already 2 weeks into June. This is crazy. I hope you guys are enjoying your summer so far. Hopefully, maybe some of you guys will be able to go on vacation. I know some are already playing baseball, softball, so things are starting to get back to somewhat normal, or what we used to know as being normal, right? I want to talk to you guys about our next series that we're going to be talking about. This series is on friendships, and most importantly, how we can make our friendships epic. We are going to be looking at some famous friendships from the Bible over these next 3 weeks, which is going to be pretty awesome. We spend a lot of time with our friends, don't we? What do you do with your friends? Sometimes we will go to the park, play sports with them, or right now, since things are starting to get back to somewhat normal, like Kings Island, Cedar Point, the zoo even, are starting to open up, and I know that these are things that we like to go out and hang out with our friends and do, right? I know I go to the zoo a lot during the summer. With my family, with friends, because it's something that we all enjoy doing together. So, most of us have expectations for our friends, right? We expect them to be there for us. We want them to support us. We want them there to listen to us. So we're going to examine some of the friendships in the Bible and how we can look at our friends and make sure that they're the type of friends that we want to have. So here's what it comes down to with friends. It takes two. You can't just have one friend or you just be your own friend, right? So it takes two people to create a friendship. If you want good friends in your life, you have to learn how to be a good friend to them. And what we are going to talk about over the next 3 weeks is a huge aspect of what friendship is. So, we're going to start looking at the book of Job. This book, this guy, he had it all. He had everything. He had friends. He had money. He had, a lot of animals. He had a large house. The guy had it all. So let's look at chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. And they read, "In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned several thousand sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to hold feasts in their homes on their birthdays and would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice burnt offerings for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children might have sinned and cursed God with their hearts. So this was Job's regular custom. So in fear of them doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing, while they were having these parties, while they were hanging out with their friends, Job would do sacrifices to make sure that his kids would be pure again, which is pretty awesome. I think, would we do sacrifices for our kids if they did anything wrong? We probably would make sacrifices, yes, but not the way that Job did. The way that he did it, we don't do that anymore. But Job would have been the kind of guy that you wanted to hang out with, right? He had a big house. He had a huge family. They partied all the time. Job had barbecues. He would invite all his friends over. kind of like what we would do in the summertime, right? Where we would invite family, we'd invite friends over, grill up some hamburgers, cook up some hot dogs, maybe some corn. We would just have a grand old time, right? Whether it's with our family or our friends. They knew how to show everyone a good time. They were a fun group of people. Job had a great life. He was wealthy. He loved the Lord. I want to think about Job as the type of guy that had it all. He had everything that you could think of. He would even give you the shirt off his back if you needed a shirt. I mean, he was like almost perfect in every way. I can imagine that Job had a bunch of friends. When everything was going well in his life, it is easy to have a bunch of friends, right? Many of you have friends like that. They are friends when it benefits them, right? So let's say that you have a pool in your backyard. Do you just have those people that call you up and say, hey, it's hot outside. Can we come over and go swimming? We want to hang out with you. Those probably aren't the type of friends that we truly want to have because it's benefiting something that they want. We want to have friends that are going to be with us through it all, whether we have a swimming pool or we don't have a swimming pool. You have siblings that you might tease a little bit, but how would you feel if your friends started teasing them? I'm pretty sure that you would stick up for them. Those aren't really the type of friends that you want to have, right? So the question is how can we know if someone is a real friend? How can we tell if they know they really care about us? How do we know if they are a true friend or are they just there because we have something that they want or that they would need? So we're going to continue reading in the book of Job, and we're going to look at verses 13 through 20. And they go. One day, when Job's son and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabines attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the heavens and burnt up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who left to tell you. While that person was speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has made it to tell you. While that person was speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. And I am the only one who escaped to tell you this. At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship. What we read here is that this is not a good day for Job, right? His kids were taken from him. His animals were taken from him. His livelihood. Everything was gone in an instant. There would be no more parties, no more cookouts, no more laughter and joy. It was just this awful day. And I'm sure that some of you have kind of had, not necessarily days like that, but you guys have had some bad days, right? And if you haven't, I'm sure at some point you guys will. But it's in those difficult times that we need to find out who's important to us. Who are our true friends? When we are down on our luck, when we are just having that bad day, we need to know who we can go to and count on to be there for us. So we're going to read in Job chapter 2 and look at verse 11. And it reads, when Job's three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, heard all about the terrible things that had happened to him, they set out from their homes and met together by the agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. You see, Job's life crashing down. The party was completely over. And I can guarantee you that most of the people at this party had probably gone. There was nobody else left, right? So it's fun to be around when the party's going on, but when things get bad, we find out who our true friends are. Everybody wants to be able to hang around and laugh, but they don't want to be around when the time is to sit around and cry. But in the middle of the mess, we see something special. Job's true friends, they show up. They hear what has happened. They get together and they head right to the heart of it. They go and see Job. Most of us probably don't want to do that. Might feel uncomfortable. It's sad. We usually don't want to be a part of anything that's sad, right? But these guys jumped right in to be there for him. You know, I think about sometimes that when things bad to happen, we find out who our true friends are. I remember when I was in my sophomore year of high school, I had lost one of my true friends. It was somebody that I hung out with. Our moms even worked together. And she was taken from us way too soon. That was a time that, man, it was tough. But in that time, I found out who my true friends were. They were the ones that came over to my house, might have just sat there playing video games. We might not have even said a word, but I knew by them being there that they cared about me. Some of my friends called me up, said, hey, how are you? What's going on? And they just let me talk. You don't always have to say something when people are going through a bad time. You can just show up and just be there for them. So Job 12 through 13 finishes out and says, when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud. And they tore their robes and sparkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. You see, we don't have to say anything to be that true friend. Sometimes when people are going through something bad, they don't want to have a big conversation. They just want somebody to be there with them, hanging out with them. So that way when they were ready to talk, they knew that somebody was there to talk with them. Sometimes we are scared to walk into a bad situation because we don't know what to say. But here's the truth. When people are hurting, a lot of times, they don't want you to say anything. They just want you to know that you love them and that you're there for them. When I've gone through difficult times, it's not the people who came up and tried to explain things to me. Sometimes it was the ones that showed up and just didn't say anything were the ones that I felt comfortable being around. You can be that person that goes out and talks to them and wants to tell them, hey, everything's going to be all right. But sometimes they don't want to hear that. They want to be able to just know that you're there for them when they need to talk. All right? So, sometimes the best thing we can do for someone who is going through a hard time is simply be there. Tell them or show them that you love them, and then be silent. If they want to talk, then listen. But you really don't have to say anything. Most of the time, there's nothing to say. Like we just read in verse 13, it said that Job and his friends sat there for 7 days and 7 nights and didn't say a word. They just were chilling. Sometimes that might be a little hard to do because we want to talk and we want to be able to help them, but sometimes just sitting there is the most important thing that we can do. So when your world falls apart, we want to know who shows up for you. Is it the people that only show up because you have a swimming pool? Or is it the people that show up when you're going through a rough time that will just sit there with you and know that they're there for you? So that's how we can measure what a true friend is. But while it's good to know who our true friends are, what's more important is for us to be true friends to others. You see, we know when people come to us that they're our friends, that they'll sit there and be beside us. But we also need to be the people that when our friends are going through something terrible, going through something rough, that we can just show up and sit next to them and just be there for them. Give them a hug. Tell them that you care about them. Tell them that you're there for them. And then just be silent. Let them come and talk to you. You cannot control how others treat you or respond to you, but you can respond how you treat others. When people are hurting or walking through dark times, and what some of them need most of all is friendship, be that friend for them. If we want to be a true friend, we simply need to be there for people when we are going through difficult times. Even if we don't speak a word, we simply just need to show up and show them that we care about them. So, big questions arise, right? Which people am I supposed to show kind and love to? We all have different levels of friendship, right? We have that best friend that we go to and tell everything to, right? I've been 5th and 6th grade. I know I had that best friend that, man, I could just call anytime, whenever I needed to talk about anything. Do we just have good friends? You know, people that we see at school, we hang out with at the playground, that we sit down with at lunchtime. You know, we kind of have mutual friends, kind of hang out together, but they're not like that best friend. Do we have casual friends or acquaintances where, you know, they just come around when it fits their time? Those sorts of things. Or do we just have random people that we know? So how far out is our net of love and encouragement supposed to go? So we're going to look at Romans chapter 12, verses 9 through 13. And they read, "Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality." We obviously are this way with our family, right? Family is important. We are there for our family. How many of you have brothers and sisters? I know I have a brother. Like I talked about earlier, we might be mean to our own brothers and sisters, and we might think that that's okay. But now I want you to think about, has any of your friends gone and said something rude about your brother or sister or your family? I'm pretty sure that you probably stood up for them, right? Probably told your friend, hey, don't go there, don't talk about that. They might even say, well, I heard you even talking about that, saying those things. That's our family. Sometimes we might say mean things just because at that moment in time, we're struggling with them, we're having issues with them. But at the end of the day, that doesn't give our friends that same right. So we need to make sure that we stick up for our family. So we need to do this for our friends, right? They're our family. They're our family in Christ. So we need to make sure that if somebody is hurting them or if they're hurting, that we're their family, that we're there to be with them. In God's eyes, we are all family. And that means the people that you surround yourself with are the folks that you want to be a part of. Put them in your group. Even if there's people that you don't go to church with or that you're not completely friends with, just know that they're family too. If you have a relationship with somebody and they're going through a difficult time, be willing to show God's love in their situation. So we're going to look at Luke chapter 10, the story, the parable of the Good Samaritan. I want you guys to look at the last two verses of that story. And they're verses 36 and 37 of chapter 10. And it reads, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in law replied, the one who had shown them mercy. Remember in the parable, there was a guy going around, like walking down the street. Some robbers came, attacked him, stripped him of his clothes, took all his money, took everything that he had. Then there was a priest that came up, walked around him because he didn't really want to deal with him because he wasn't clean, he wasn't looking all that well. Somebody from the temple walked by as well, stepped over to the other side, walked around him because there again, he wasn't looking like that perfect person. But then we had the Good Samaritan, the guy that just came up, showed him some love, showed him grace, understood, and took him on his donkey, cleaned him up, took him to the inn, paid for the guy to stay at the inn until he was healed and being ready to move on in his journey. We need to make sure that we are those people. We don't need to be like the high priest. We don't need like the assistant from the temple and just walk around when people are hurting. We need to be like the Good Samaritan and we need to go to them. We might not know these people at all, but if we can see that somebody is hurting or that somebody's having problems, we need to make sure that we're there and that we can help them through it. It's not always easy to do. It can be extremely difficult. You don't know the person. But to be there for them when they were going through a time of need, the Good Samaritan didn't really say anything to the stranger, to this person, did he? No, he just picked him up, he cleaned him off, helped him dress his wounds, make sure he was taken care of, and then he paid for his hotel room or his room at the inn for several nights. And then he went on his way. We don't have to say anything. All we have to do is just be there for that person. Sometimes some of us will come by our path and they will be at their lowest point. You won't have really known them before, but you have to be able to be there for them, comfort them. Do what God would want us to do. We need to care for the ones that are hurting. We need to trust God that He will put others in our lives who will do the same for us when we are walking through our toughest days. You see, friendships, they don't have to be just our best friend. They don't have to be just our family. They can just be a random person on the street to where if they're hurting, that we just go there and we say, hey, I love you. I care about you. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you. And then be silent. Let them talk, but be there for them. Let them know that you care about them. It can be easy to walk by and just say, hey, they've got friends, they've got family, they can handle it. But I can tell you that there are going to be situations where that person doesn't have a family, doesn't have a friend to help and take them in. That's when we need to be the hands and feet of God, and we need to be able to comfort them and be there for them and show them God's love. You know, like we say in our mission statement, that Jesus is our focus, community is our mission, and you are loved. We need to take that focus of Jesus, bring it into our community where people might be struggling, have a hard time. We need to be that person for them and let them know that they are loved. Because like I said, this person that you come across might not have family, might not have friends, or they do, and their family and friends are just letting them be. They're not being there for them, they're not talking to them, they're just like, hey, just whatever. It happens. I've seen it. So we just need to make sure that we are there for them whenever they're going through a rough time. But we also need to make sure that we surround ourselves with friends that when we are struggling and we're having a rough day or a bad time or, you know, a bad season, that they will come to us and sit down next to us and just be there for us. So you see, it takes two people for a friendship. It's not just a one-way street. But we need to make sure that we are putting ourselves out there to our friends, but in return, we need to make sure that our friends will put themselves by us when we are hurting, when we are struggling. So we're going to be talking about the next couple of weeks, 2 other epic friendships that I think are going to be completely awesome to look at. So bow with me and pray, and we'll pray. Dear God, thank you for today. Thank you for everything that you do for us, putting friends in our lives that will be there by our sides when we are struggling, and also putting us into other people's lives when they are struggling. That way we can show them your love and your grace and let them know that they're not alone. We don't always have to say one word. We can just sit there and be there for them. Like Job's friends did. They came, they just sat down next to him and just sat there for 7 days and 7 nights. We need to make sure that we are able to do those same things for our friends. And we just lift everything up to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Guys, I hope that you get a lot out of this series about epic friendships, because as a 5th and 6th grader, we need to make sure that we are starting to build those relationships that will last us the rest of our lives. So I can't wait to see you guys, and I hope you guys have a good week, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.